Srilanka, Chairman of the National Committee, Mrs. Apadure and Dr. Apadure, Past President, members, guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to deliver the Professor Arish Paul Memorial Lecture to this audience at a time when the electricity industry, to which Professor Paul would have trained and provided a large number of engineers, is at crossroads. And that's the subject of my presentation this evening, about the new electricity pricing policy in Sri Lanka. A long-term debt overhang of 200 billion rupees and expected to increase to 500 billion rupees by 2015. A business in which the income is inadequate to meet even 90% of the expenses, and an electricity pricing structure which is commonly believed to be the most expensive in the region. And of course, the only country in South Asia not to have any planned load shedding since year 2000. Perhaps the only country in South Asia where all electricity sold is measured and invoiced, and the money collected for almost all those invoices. And with over 40% of electricity coming from renewable sources, our electricity industry is making losses. So is there a way out? Isn't there a way out? Later on I would argue in my paper that there is a way out. And Sri Lanka has already embarked on the reform process, which should take the electricity industry back to profitability by 2015, and at the same time giving relief to the electricity customers, and then the process has started. And the presentation in the paper is about that process. The electricity sector financial status is as you see in this chart. It's not a very healthy situation. The net profit or the loss was 33 billion rupees as reported in 2008. And the average price of electricity was estimated last year to be 13 rupees and 15 cents, whereas the cost, inclusive of a major subsidy from the government, was 1691. So that is the gap between the cost and the price. And this is not a healthy situation. The prices in the region. Sri Lanka's prices are, as many would like to believe, or many say very often, I would argue, are not the highest in the region. But for certain categories of customers that you see in this chart, color in purple, Sri Lanka is the highest. And for other categories, Singapore is the highest. So, we need to ask whether comparisons are reasonable. And we have to be cautious when making comparisons of electricity prices between countries. Because it may be that the other countries in the region carry more subsidies from the government than the electricity industry in Sri Lanka. Or there are countries in which there are natural energy resources, renewable or fossil, which are underpriced. So an underpriced fossil resource that the country provides to the electricity sector would cause the price of electricity to be lower. So we should not rush into conclusion, but from a customer point of view, it is always good to compare the prices in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. And the costs of year 2010 and 2011. This chart indicates that the production cost of electricity, as you would see under the line generation 12, is expected to cause a reduction in the overall cost of electricity when this year is compared with last year. This cost reduction is very specifically owing to one power plant that is to be commissioned this month, which is at Putnam, and that power plant alone, according to our estimate, would bring a cost reduction of 16 billion rupees to the state. That is why the 10 rupee 54 figure has come down to 8 rupees 11. Now, how do we pass this cost to customers? Now, passing this cost to customers is a completely different exercise, and we see that in the situation that we see in Sri Lanka, the price structure is very complicated. As it evolved over 60, 70 years, the price structure is sometimes difficult to be understood by engineers. Determining the type of customer is a nightmare of a commercial engineer, who sometimes has to decide whether your family is one family or two families. The engineer has to decide. And whether your industry has enough motive power to be classified as an industry. And whether the tourist hotel is serving the tourist industry or some other commercial service. So, over the years, is a series of confusing definitions which are quite well known to the commercial engineers of the two electricity supply organizations, CB and LECO. We have made our price structure very complicated and the definition very ambiguous. And we need to come out of this. But before we look at the ways of coming out of this, let us look at what's going on in the background by way of the cost structure in the electricity industry. Earlier we looked at year 2011 in comparison with year 2010. But now we look at a broader or a longer future, where the costs of year 2010 up to 2015 have been traced in this chart. And as you see, the total costs are decreasing, and the dominant contributor to the reduction of cost is the cost of fuel used in power generation. If you look at the second block of data from the bottom, you will see that the production cost or the fuel cost that is embedded in the total cost of electricity is going down from 1054 as estimated for last year to 559 in year 2015. And that signifies the window of opportunity that the country has to bring a resolution to the problem of electricity pricing in Sri Lanka. The cost is decreasing in real terms. Of course, the decrease is in real terms. In case the parameters that determine the cost go up, all the parameters will go up. Then secondly, there is a requirement, and the targets have been set to reduce the losses in the transmission and distribution network. That provides the second opportunity to restructure the electricity prices in this country. And thirdly, the overall network improvement improvements are going on, and the network utilization is increasing. So therefore, led by the reduction in generation fuel cost, the country now has a golden opportunity, or as I would call it, a window of opportunity, to resolve many of the problems in the electricity industry. The chief of which is the very sad financial performance of the electricity sector. And the second, what is more important to the electricity customers, is the price of electricity. The network losses, the figures you see here, are the figures that have been fixed and provided as targets to the sector by the government to be reached by year 2015. The total network loss, which was estimated to be 14.2%, is targeted to go down to 12.1%. Although we are happy that even at 14.2%, Sri Lanka is probably the best in South Asia. And as I would like to say, the best is still not good enough. We can do better by decreasing the network losses, which include the theft and problems related to bad metering, by controlling these and bringing it down to 12%. Then, the electricity industry is now in transition, not only in terms of price, it's in transition from an unregulated, traditional, government-owned, ministry-driven institution to a group of licensees which are regulated in a transparent manner. In the new regulatory structure, there are generators, some of which are private, large and small, fossil fuel or renewable energy using, and there are CEE owned generators. And in the new regulatory structure, they will be selling electricity only to transmission. That's a constraint that is established by the Electricity Act of 2009. And these sales will be based on power purchase agreement, which means there is no competition between generators in real time or in short term to meet a given demand. And existing power purchase agreements will continue, and the new power purchase agreement will only be based on an approved plan and competitive bid. So the new Electricity Act and the new regulatory structure has already brought in some rules of the game in operating power plants and in procuring new power plants. And the transmission of power from power generation to distribution is the responsibility of the transmission licensee. And there is only one transmission licensee, and the Electricity Act identifies the transmission licensee to be the Ceylon Electricity Board. But it is a separate business. And within that business, the transmission licensee has three activities. The first activity is the transmission wire business, as it is commonly called, building and maintaining the transmission network, the wires and the equipment. The second business is the operation of the transmission system, including the dispatch of power plants into the transmission system. And the third business is the bulk supply business, which means buying from generation and selling to distribution. And as I have summarized here, the transmission licensee is not expected to make a profit and not expected to make a loss by the bulk supply business. Whereas from the other two businesses, if he is doing the business very well, he will make a profit, otherwise he will make a loss. And there are investments for which he will have to borrow. And in the new regulatory structure, there are 5 distribution licenses, and 4 of which are CEB owned, and the 5th one is the Lanka Electricity Company. And these 5 licensees, which for all practical purposes are independent entities in the eyes of the regulator, also have 3 activities. One is the distribution wire business, building and maintaining the distribution network at medium voltage and at low voltage. And the second one is a retail service, which is inspecting meters, reading the meter, issuing the bill, and collecting the money. And the third one is the retail business itself, which is buying from transmission and selling to distribution. And that one, if the licensee manages very well, should be revenue neutral. No profit, no loss. So therefore, the industry that has been vertically integrated, with all these businesses are in one, has now been restructured according to the law established by the Electricity Act of year 2009 to be an unbundled industry managed by a group of licensees. In the new tariff policy, all the licensees are considered to be financially independent. It is true that some of the licensees are owned by one company, which is the Ceylon Electricity Board. But all the licensees and their operations are what is called in the jargon ring-fenced. Now what that means is that the licensee is responsible only for matters under his control, and he will be rewarded for exceeding the target. For example, if he is given a target to reduce the losses, and if he does better, he will be making a profit. And he will be similarly penalized for underperformance. For example, increasing the network loss. But at the same time, for parameters that are not within his control, the licensees are transparently either compensated or surcharged. Say, for example, if the government wants more subsidies to be given, the licensee will be compensated for that amount of money. And if the government does not pay the subsidy to the licensee, then what should happen is that the relevant customers should be surcharged after a few months. And if the single buyer who purchases from generation and sells to distribution hits a drought period, then he should be compensated. And correspondingly, the customers should be surcharged. And the opposite is also true. If rains come plenty, then the money saved by the transmission licensee in purchasing electricity from generation should be clawed back and returned to customers who are the owners of that money. So that's what you mean by ring fencing. Keeping the responsibilities separate and clearly identified. However, the long and painful history of underpricing electricity in Sri Lanka hopefully will come to an end very soon under the new pricing policy that has already commenced operation. And simultaneously, the naming and blaming game should come to an end. Which means, if there is a loss or a profit, if there is a good performance or underperformance, the person or the licensee or the institution or the external factors, such as oil prices, weather, will be clearly identified. And the customers correspondingly surcharged or compensated. This means all costs and prices and the performance of the licensee and the performance of the government as well, with regard to the commitment that have been given to the sector, will be published. And there will be clear separation of the data. Now coming back to generation cost.